السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحلقة دي مميزة جدا. حلقة رقم 31 من هاز كاست. الحلقة دي بالإنجليزي إن شاء الله. انتوا اللي متابعني يعني بقاله فترة كافية هيبقى عارف إن أنا من أهدافي جدا 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 إن أنا أعمل محتوى بالإنجليزي علشان أحاول أوصل لجمهور عالمي أكتر وأحاول أجيب ناس جلوبال اكتر، وناس يعني ناس احنا ما نعرفهمش، ناس ما يعرفوناش، ونبتدي بشكل ما نعمل يعني ايه جلوبال كوميونيتي، او نعمل بلاتفورم نقدر نخش عليه نشوف مين بيعمل ايه، مين من المسلم تشينج ميكرز او المسلم كرييتيفز او كده. مين شغال. مهم جدا بالنسبة لي الموضوع ده. و ولو انتوا برضو متابعين هتبقوا عارفين ان انا الحمد لله يعني حاطط لنفسي شوية اهداف كده من البودكاست. والبودكاست نفسه كان هدفي منه ان انا مثلا اعمل لايف بودكاست، وعملته اجيب فيميل او اجيب بنت، وعملت ده وان انا اعمل بودكاست اونلاين، وعملت ده الحمد لله. والباب الاكبر بالنسبه لي هو ان انا اعمل بودكاست بالانجليزي، والحمد لله دي اول حلقه هتبقى كده. هتنزل على الشانل عادي، وهتنزل على بقيه البودكاست ابس عادي. اللي برضه حابب افكركم انه البودكاست اصلا بينزل اوديو. يعني هو لو انت عندك ابل بودكاست، لو انت عندك جوجل بودكاست، لو انت عندك كاست بوكس، لو انت عندك سبوتيفاي، كل ده البودكاست بينزل عليه. فاسمعوه جدا على الابس ديت. آم، الحلقة دي ان شاء الله زي ما قلت لكم هتبقى بالانجليزي، والانترو هيبقى بالعربي في الحلقة دي بس. فلو نزلت بودكاست بالانجليزي تاني، الانترو برضه هتبقى بالانجليزي، عشان لو في فرصة ان البودكاست يتشاف او يتسمع من جلوبال اودينس، الانترو ما تساهم في ده كمان، ما تبقاش حاجة بتعطل البروسيس. الضيف اللي معايا النهاردة شخص ملهم جدا ليا الحقيقة. هو واسمه يعني الصراحة صايع جدا يعني من أجمل الأسماء اللي سمعتها في حياتي. اسمه روح العالم. روح العالم الصراحة اسم خارق جدا ما شاء الله. اللي فيكو ديزاينر ممكن يبقى عارفه. هو كاليجرافيست، بيكتب كاليجرافي وخط عربي وليه الستايل الخاص بيه. وهو جرافيك ديزاينر وفريلانسر وانتربرينور بشكل ما، وعنده يعني أنشطة كتير، عنده كذا شركة. عنده شركته بتاعت الديزاين والتايبوجرافي والكلام دوت، اسمها اركيتايب، موجودة شغال فيها. هو الكو فاوندر بتاع اسلامك ديزاين هاوس. اللي فيكو عارفه اسلامك ديزاين هاوس بيعملوا لبس مودرن للبنات وكده. ليهم فرع في مول العرب هنا في مصر، وفروع حول العالم. يعني لسه فاتحين فرع في الهند من يمكن امبارح او حاجه. فالمناقشه كانت قويه جدا، وكانت عميقه جدا عن الديزاين وعن الهويه وعن الاسلام، وانا كمسلم اعمل ايه، وريبريزنت ديني ازاي، وشغلي ازاي يبقى اسلامي من غير ما يبقى يعني رخم او بيجزع او حاجات زي كده. انا استفدت جدا جدا. المناقشه طولت جامد المره دي. ورغم كده احنا مخلصناش كلام. فانا متوقع ان شاء الله ان احنا نتجمع تاني. وهو اصلا عشان يتعلم عربي جه مصر، قعد سنتين او اكتر. ففكرة ان هو يجي مصر دي مش صعبة خالص يعني. هو اصله من بنجلاديش، بس هو مولود في انجلترا. فهو انجليزي. ودي كانت مناقشة برضو مهمة جدا، اللي هو عن الهوية والكلام ده كله. فأتمنى ان انتوا تتبسطوا بالحلقة زي ما انا اتبسطت صراحة جدا. يعني اتعلمت جدا وحاسس ان في باب اتفتح، باب كبير جدا الحمد لله. واتمنى ان انتوا تبقوا مبسوطين وحاسين بالخطوة دي زي ما انا حاسس بيها. حابب اتكلم عن السبونسر بتاع الاسبوع ده، وهو استبرق. استبرق هي شركة الهدوم بتاعتي. آه، هدفنا ان احنا نجمع كوميونتي حوالين القيم اللي احنا بنمثلها. هدفنا ان احنا الناس تبقى حاسة ان هي بتنتمي يعني تبقى تحت مظلة معينة، وعارفين انه في ناس تانية زيها. بنعمل ديزاينز بالعربي وبالانجليزي، كلها بترفلكت الاسلام بشكل ما او اخر، واحيانا بشكل مباشر، احيانا بشكل غير مباشر. ودلوقتي بقينا بنشيب في كل دول العالم. فلو انت ساكن في انجلترا، لو انت ساكن في المانيا، لو انت ساكن في فرنسا، لو انت ساكن في فلسطين، اي مكان بنشيب لي الحمد لله. لو استخدمت الكود هازكاست على الموقع في التشيك اوت هتاخد ديسكاونت 15%. حابب برضو اشكر الباترونز بتوعي جدا، اللي هم سبب رئيسي في استمرارية البودكاست. بجد انتوا فعليا سبب رئيسي في ده. لو انت حابب تدعم البودكاست خش على باتريون. ولو حابب تعمل اعلان على هازكاست ابعت لي في الايميل اللي في الديسكريبشن h@hazem.tv. ويلا نبتدي الحلقة. Awesome. So like I'm actually I started recording right now.
Okay, cool.
So
Yeah,
we're live.
me too.
Like I was saying that the goal of the podcast is to because like so many of us are doing their own thing, but I mean you don't know that I exist. Basically, I don't know what you're doing. So my goal has always been to connect people and to like us, and like reinforce the idea that there are people out there like you, and we're all facing the same challenges and stuff, and we're all kind of want to reach the same goal and stuff, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's how it should be. I mean, we've got all the tools in front of us, and if we're not taking advantage of connecting even more, we're not going to be able to see the full potential of what's possible as well. And in most of us, our generations, we don't have the baggage that others have. We don't have the restrictions. We see people as equals to us, right? And everyone's got brilliant ideas, and what kind of unites all of us together, even if we don't speak the same language or the same culture, well, at least we're connected on faith or some global identity that we can connect on, and that's what makes it really work. And I think the more people can connect, more people know about what others are doing, I think we can get a lot more done.
What do you mean by baggage?
So you'll have a lot of people who, I mean, there are, the older generations will have not traveled as much. They've lived all their lives in their country. They know little about outside worlds and countries because they've not had the chance to, or they're closed off because mentally or psychologically or culturally they've been misinformed, and so on. So there's the othering of foreigners and so on. There's racism involved. There's inferiority complexes and all that sort of stuff. But we as a generation, we are going from analog world to a digital world. We suddenly started connecting to the internet, and so our parents or our generation, their generation never had that opportunity. The most they did was maybe write letters, if that, right? And then the phone calls, and even the satellite TV didn't do anything. It just reinformed that the outside world is backward or dangerous or hates us. Or do you understand all of those things, depending which part of the world you're coming from? But we grew up having a more of a democratic approach to where we take in information, the sort of this because of the internet mostly, and so our generations were connected, we're more willing to consider the other people of other races and other faiths and whatnot to be more equal to us, and we're less racist towards them or them towards us, and that sort of breaks down all those barriers and walls and misconceptions that other people might tend to have. That's what I mean by our generations being a bit different. It's not entirely like that, but there's a whole lot of people who think like that and who believe in that, and they don't want to be considered, particularly in the West, more than maybe anywhere else. And maybe it is happening in places like Egypt and other places, that people don't want to consider themselves just British or just American or just French or maybe just Egyptian. They consider themselves citizen of the world. You know, they consider themselves more global, whether they've traveled or not,
Yes.
because what they believe in and the mentality they want the way they see the world. They dream of being in different places, interacting with different people, seeing new cultures, learning new languages. That sort of attitude, that sort of self-identity, that's who I am, is a newer, fresher thing amongst younger generations. Even more so in the sort of the Generation Z, you know, that we have coming up.
Yeah.
But we're, you know, I would consider millennials. So we were the generation that sort of went from analog, you know, playing out in the streets and bikes and whatnot, right, to suddenly having internet access, you know, in your home, you know, and then mobile phones. But that generation below us, they woke up with smartphones in their hands, you know, and that's completely different experience. And that's what I'm talking about when I mean there's generational gaps, not just because of technology, but because of the way they've read beyond the world and outside and what they've been fed. And so our outlook on the world is different, and therefore I think better place to connect and collaborate and whatnot.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's very interesting. The idea that we as Muslims, by the way, I lived in Canada for the first like quarter of my life, maybe 7 years or something. So I
Right.
completely relate to what you're saying about wanting to be a global citizen and stuff. And like my goal in life is to make da'wah, you know, through not necessarily in a direct fashion, but I mean, I think you're pretty much the same. I mean, you have the same concepts and stuff. So taking into consideration that global citizen thing, I mean, that's probably the best way to make da'wah, is to be global, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, some of us may, I mean, you're in Egypt now, but you know, you have enough years in Canada to know how it is to be in one place, and then another place, and maybe sometimes not belong, because maybe in Egypt you're a foreigner, you know,
Yes.
and in Canada you're a foreigner.
Totally.
So I was born in London. I was brought up in the UK. I didn't have a home to go back to, right? So my parents moved over. They went back occasionally. We went back on holidays, but there was no really home back in Bangladesh, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So what we felt growing up as Muslims, as a minority in the UK, but we were completely British in every other way. You know, in my family anyway, we weren't very Asian, so we weren't into Bollywood and all of that. You know, we came from quite a conservative religious family. So for us, our identity was formed around religion and being British, as opposed to being Asian. Does that make sense, right?
Yes.
So it's quite different from maybe other Asians growing up in the UK. But all of us still had a sense of belonging and not belonging in the UK, right?
I completely understand. I completely understand what you're saying. How I mean, you feel that you don't necessarily have a home in the world, basically, right? 'Cause,
Yeah, to a large extent. I mean, most of us still feel very British. So if we go abroad, we're very proud to be British, not because of anything else, but other than the fact that that's home, because that's where you create memories, right? So wherever you have family and memories and friends, that's what's going to be your home. You know, everything that we do, the way we behave, the way we talk, and everything is British in every way. When you're in Britain, you can feel like not being fully 100% British, because others make you feel like you know, like that, and particularly you know, and so you can understand what that dynamism is.
but do
But
they?
you
I
know,
mean, do others really make you feel like that, or is it something that you? I mean, you just think that they're thinking. You know what I mean?
well, there are situations where there's institutional racism or systems in place that exclude people of ethnic minority and color and religion. And that happens in workplaces and in certain industries and so on. You know, there was a time growing up when it felt like you were just part of the city of the world of the UK, and you wouldn't see any direct racism. Then again, my brother's generation, who's older than me by say 10 years, he would they would have racists at the door, on the streets outside. They would have skirmishes and gang battles almost. They had to fend off and run off and run away from racist thugs who are after black and Asian people in the country. So that was a generation in the sort of 80s. They had to fight off a lot of that. For us, we didn't see it. Some people of my age, we didn't see some of that, right? So we grew up in, not seeing that sort of racism, but you only realize it later on when you get into the workplace and other situations. And it's more pronounced maybe for some black people. But as soon as 9/11 happened, things switched, right, for Muslims in particular. And so that was a turning point for Muslims, when suddenly the spotlight is on your identity as your faith identity. And that significantly changed things for a lot of people. I know a lot of people who lost jobs. I know a lot of people who couldn't get jobs, even though they were highly qualified for those roles for a number of years. And I know that people left jobs and then went solo or went freelance, because that was the only option that they could go with, because in the industry they just couldn't climb any higher. We have a Muslim mayor in London, and we have Muslim politicians. That's all well and good, but the underlying issue is that things have become even more difficult over the years. Of the last 10 years, things are becoming more and more leaning towards the right, the more extreme right of everything in the country, and just much like the rest of Europe. A lot of that far right rhetoric, racism, is now growing quite considerably in the UK. Brexit is a good example of what comes out of that sort of atmosphere. When people voted in the recent politician, prime minister, it wasn't done because on whether he's a good man or a bad man, or the opposition was a good man or a bad man, but more so because of the fact that it's Brexit. It's about kicking out the immigrants, getting rid of people who don't look like them. So when the prime minister got elected, the first things started to happen were racist attacks, Islamophobic attacks on Muslims, because they thought they had voted to get the Muslims out. So you've got those kind of situations, but it's not all bad, and it's not all gloom and doom. We've established, like in Canada, there's loads of well-established mosques and institutions in many parts of the country, and they're here to stay. The Muslim community is a fairly strong community in the UK. I think almost 3 million Muslims, and the most diverse mix as well, right? And so it's amazing. In London in particular, I mean, when you go to pray, you have it's like being on a Hajj, because every nationality, every different background, you'll find in the mosque. And that's what's nice, about being in London and being in the UK. You see that contrast.
Well, my thing is about I mean, you said I feel proud to be from England and stuff. I mean, my thing is being proud, because I don't really know what you mean by proud. I mean, do you want to represent the country? Because me personally, being proud of something or your nation, I can't really be proud of being Egyptian at this point in time. You know what I mean? I don't necessarily represent the current Egypt, and at the same time, I can't say I'm fully Canadian, even though I have the citizenship, but I can't say it fully. You know what I mean? So I find myself like longing to find this thing that I represent, which is Islam, right? But sometimes you really want to represent the place that you're from.
Yeah. That the land, or I understand. When I say proud, you have to understand that we're not necessarily talking about. We're not proud of England right now or the UK right now. A lot of Muslims, a lot of people, non-Muslims will say they're not proud of the country because of the way the direction it's going. But that's not to say that we've forgotten some of the good history, not necessarily the bad history. We know the bad history as well. So we know the history of colonialism. We know it destroyed many countries around the world, including Egypt and my country, Bangladesh, back home. There's so many atrocities in British history. But what I'm talking about is some of the people the great people who are from this country, the great systems that this country established and so on, like the NHS, the National Health Service, and so many other great things that have been done over the years, the inventions, the creativity. There's a lot of great things that come out of this country, and you're proud of a country also because you've lived there and you've created an emotional bond, right, with the country. I could say the same thing about Egypt for myself, because I've lived there for a period of time, that I created an emotional bond with Egypt as a country. I know that not everything's hunky-dory or not, or beautiful about what's going on, but that's not going to take away from the amazing Islamic history and the bad Islamic history, because there's some bad stuff that went on. There's amazing Egyptian history before that, right? Yeah. There's amazing people in Egypt, right? Really intelligent people. Some of them have left the country, unfortunately, but some of them are still there. But if only they had the opportunity to really study and really have the opportunity, the country would be amazing. You know, so I can recognize all of those things, and I could say you could be proud of your country for those things, but at the same time, you can also take a position where you are not happy with, where the country is, right? So being proud is not an absolute, right? It has, multiple layers and different positions. Yeah, I'm proud about one thing, but not proud about another. Right? Yeah. So we should always accept that it's not black and white.
It reminds me of when the Prophet ﷺ left Mecca, and he was heartbroken that he had to leave. And I mean, I kind of relate to that feeling. Yeah,
look, really Mecca was a pagan city, right? Yeah. People were not. There was no salah, at that time, right? But he still loved that piece of land, because it had a history, a heritage. Ibrahim alayhi salam, had built the house and all of that. There's so much legacy, so you can be proud of that place, but you're not adopting everything. And we need to be nuanced about it.
So I mean, let me start. I mean, we haven't essentially started.
No, I understand. There's no intro, and absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. I actually give an intro about you before the podcast, so people know who you are by now. Let me do something that I haven't done before. Let me shoot some rapid fire questions at you. Where is it? Yeah. So, what's your favorite? I mean, anything that comes to mind, just throw the answer, right? What's your favorite clothing brand currently?
Clothing brand? Gosh, I can't even. Sorry, it's gone. Sorry. I'd like to say something, but I don't have a clothing brand that I'm a fan of at this point.
Okay.
Sorry.
So nothing. You're not a fan of any clothing brands right now.
No, I used to be. I used to be in some of the designer brands, but no longer anymore. And I don't shop with brands anymore, as it were.
Interesting. Why is that?
Yeah. I think I went through a phase where I was buying all of the designer brands, and I studied fashion for a short period of time at college, and I realized that it's all about branding, right? In terms of manufacture of clothing, the quality of clothing cannot be that significantly different in a lot of the times. And so you're essentially buying into the brand label and what it stands for. And I felt that a lot of the designer brands were sort of very shallow, right?
Applause.
So they became really shallow, and there's no real message behind it. And so I can understand why some people might buy G-Star, or I can understand why some people might buy really fancy, high quality built watches, because watches are made with just pure love and art, right? That is worth spending money on, as opposed to buying clothing for the same price that you might not wear that often, and it really is priced at that level because of the label that's attached to it. Not to say that labels are not important. They are, right? Because a lot of times good brands will bring quality with them. Quality of production, quality of experience, and so on. So Apple is a good example of typically quality, really well produced, technology, and the experience is brilliant from the moment you open the box, till from the software, right? They've covered every step, usually very, very well with very little problems. I bought a Windows laptop recently. I just I don't know why I bought it, but a constant number of problems. And I'm now deciding to return it and just buy a Mac because the experience is different. That branding is experience,
Yeah.
it's not the label, as such. But the brand name or the label usually brings the quality, and I find a lot of it's consumer labeling. So you might have a designer catwalk, but by the time it goes to the shelves of a store, it's a completely different product. It's mass manufactured, poor quality, labeled items. It's not worth paying money for. In my opinion.
I'm gonna hop on this aspect again, but I mean,
Okay.
Obviously I haven't done this quick fire thing before because I'm supposed to just ask and you're just supposed to answer. So
I know, yeah. Go on.
Okay, what's your favorite food?
Maybe, my favorite food is lasagna.
Interesting. What's your favorite Egyptian food?
Tamia.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. This might get us into problems. What's your favorite football club?
Liverpool.
Okay. Oh, man. Yeah. Okay.
Liverpool.
Because I'm United, so.
Oh well, yeah. Well.
I don't do Liverpool, and I don't care for Salah. I mean, I love the guy, but no.
Yeah, Abba Makkah. Yani, come on, you can't. Salah is everything.
I mean, if he's playing against United, I mean, I'd like him to score a goal, but I want the team to lose as well.
No, absolutely no. So Mohamed Salah is, even with or without him, the team's doing amazing.
Yeah, true.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So this next one, you answered it a few minutes ago. Mac or Windows? Obviously Mac.
Mac.
Yeah, 100%. What's your favorite type of hat? Because you said you wore lots of hats.
Fedora hats.
That's like that.
Yeah, it's like that with the ring. Yeah.
Okay.
Those. Cool. I mean, I used to wear them. I've not worn them for a very long time.
Cool.
But I used to wear them a lot.
What country would you prefer to live in if you had the chance to choose?
Oh, that's difficult. That keeps changing. It was Malaysia before, then it became maybe Turkey. So it's difficult to say. I'll say Turkey for now.
Interesting. I kind of have that same feeling. Turkey.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
What's your favorite movie?
Favorite movie? I don't have a particular favorite movie. The last one I liked was The Joker, the new one.
Yeah, that was crazy.
That's a good.
It was messed up.
Yeah.
Tea or coffee?
Tea.
Very British. Fish and chips or burgers?
Burgers.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
Very not British.
You'd be surprised. Actually, there are more burger shops now than there are fish and chip shops.
Okay, America has dominated.
Well, actually, a lot of the burger shops are run by Asians, Muslims.
Oh man! If you had the chance to invite 3 people over for dinner, any 3 people on earth.
Oh, subhanallah. Obviously, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right?
Sallallahu.
Malcolm X.
Wow.
And probably Steve Jobs. I know they're very different.
I mean, I'd like to just watch. I mean, what the Prophet would say to Steve Jobs. What a weird dynamic, man. That would be so cool. What's your favorite cartoon character?
Oh man, favorite cartoon character. I can't think of. I can't think of a favorite cartoon. There's so many good cartoon characters that not one particular one comes to mind. I don't know. I honestly don't know what my favorite cartoon character is. I'll say Woody from Toy Story.
Okay, awesome. Do you prefer calling or texting?
Texting.
Cool. What's your favorite day of the week and why?
Probably Saturday, because usually the first day you get to lie in a little bit during the week. And then usually family time, so it's usually a lot more slow paced compared to the rest of the week.
Cool. Say something in Bengali.
Amar naam Ruh.
Okay, cool. Amar naam Hazem, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Nice. Say something in Arabic.
Uh, I don't know. Now you put me in the spot. I don't know. ازيك.
Alhamdulillah.
تمام
Okay,
يعني.
you're pretty good in Arabic, huh?
يعني شوية مش كثير يعني مش يعني قليلا بالعربي
قليلا.
بالفصحى. لا أنا بتكلم عربي شوية يعني مش أنا كنت في مصر سنتين في 2005 لدراسة اللغة العربية فصحى والخط العربي كمان.
Nice. Inshallah. I'm done with these weird questions. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it was pretty cool. Right?
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I know I didn't. It wasn't as quick fire, but yeah, we can. I'm sure it came out okay.
All right, so let's jump into it. I mean, you decided to travel to Egypt to learn calligraphy, right?
Yeah. So this is after I graduated. I was already I started doing some calligraphic work when I was still in the UK, but I felt that I didn't have the grounding, the proper grounding in traditional penmanship. So Turkey wasn't an option at the time, and I kind of wanted to go to Egypt because I could learn Arabic as a language there as well at the same time. So went there and found a calligrapher. His name is Khudair Bursaidi.
Okay.
He's got a maktab in Hussein, and he used to teach, and with his student as well, Ahmed Faris. I studied with them in Khat. There's also another teacher, Salah Abdul Khaliq. He also taught me in Kufic script, particularly. But yeah, I learnt it. I got my foundation in calligraphy there, and I think that's what allowed me to continue to do what I wanted to do. But if I didn't have that, I don't think I'd be doing the same kind of work at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to me because you were at the time when you graduated, you were probably like what, 22 or something?
Yeah, so 22, around that age. So I finished the university, and literally the next year we went abroad. I mean, I went on holiday to Egypt before that with friends and so on, and traveled from Egypt, Palestine, Syria. But then we decided, a bunch of us together, to move to Egypt. But 2-3 of them were in Azhar, so they were doing Thanawiyah and then going into do the actual the study at Azhar in the degree. But the rest of us were just picking up Arabic for the first time, So we're still young enough, and prior to that, our Arabic was literally just what we could read the Quran but not understand it, So that's the scenario with most Asians and non-Arab Muslims around the world, that they won't know Arabic per se, but they'll know how to read the Quran to some degree, but not understand it. So learning the language was an important thing. So obviously we were learning standard Arabic, Fusha, but we also got the chance to learn Ammiya while we were there. Because obviously when you spoke to a taxi driver randomly in Fusha, he'd like, okay, but then sometimes you met completely fluent taxi driver who spoke the best Arabic you can think of, because he's an Arabic teacher by day and he's a taxi driver by night. And then you're like, okay, and then you got to practice.
That's epic. I mean, to me, the idea of just moving to a country, and let alone Egypt, I mean, because we're in Egypt, we don't really see the benefits of Egypt. We live here and stuff, and we always look to the outside and we're like, we live in a hellhole and stuff. And on your end, when you wanted to learn Arabic, you came here. I mean, so it's really it's amazing to me. How do you guys view Egypt from over there?
Well, there is a romantic impression of Egypt and the Middle East in general. If you're a Muslim, then you have a particular romantic impression of the Middle East, because that's where the region of the prophets all came from, you know. And so you feel that the people of the region are somewhat, you know, this is a misconception, but somehow are closer to either the faith or the language and so on. And so there's a gravity towards going to these countries. Egypt obviously is steeped in history, right? And it's very welcoming and accessible. The people are, you know, really friendly, and it's welcoming and accessible. You know, Saudi Arabia seems a bit more closed off, you know. So if you're a student, yeah, you can go and study in Medina University or whatever. But Egypt is just a lot more open. There are independent, you know, centers and stuff. So for us, Egypt, it was and is was a country. I mean, I say was because that's the different impression then and then after.
After
you
you
don't
went,
know,
or
yeah.
after the incidents.
So there's maybe three different scenarios, right? So you
Okay.
know, before you go to a country, you have a particular impression of it, and you live there for a bit, and then after other things have happened in that country, and you know, and for many of us, and myself on a very personal level, I experienced all of those things, and I will continue to do so with Egypt in particular. But yeah, before you go, you have this impression that it's, you know, the land of the prophets, you know, it's all of these things. And you get there and you realize, yeah, the country's been going through a lot historically. And you'll only appreciate it if you know the history, right? A lot of people don't know the history. So a lot of tourists go and they have trouble. A lot of people love Egypt. They fall in love with it. It's magical to them, right? And then there's a lot of people who they're frustrated with it for so many different reasons, right? As tourists, not people who live there, but as tourists, you get so much frustration because of it. But they don't know the history. They don't know what's happening, or why things have occurred like that, or why certain behaviors are there, or whatever, right? And then if you've lived there for a period of time, you get used to a lot of things, right? You get used to certain behaviors. Like we in England, and you know, it's a famous English stereotype that we line up, we have a queue, right? So we line behind each other, waiting patiently for something. But in a lot of, not just Egypt, but in a lot of Eastern countries, there is no concept of that. They don't understand the concept of lining up, right, in a row. It's all about who can go to the front first, right? Yes. Whether it's women or men, it's just like, it's me, myself, right? I need to get there, right? And so you got to get used to that kind of thing, right? You don't have to accept it, but you have to get used to it, right? But those are the bad things. All the good things are that, you know, the place has so much to do and see, and there's so many great people that you experience. And so a lot of people tend to fall in love with places like Egypt. For some Muslims, they feel like they want to migrate to places like Egypt because they're tired of living in some Western countries, or they're afraid for their children growing up in those countries. So they want to bring them to a more Muslim environment. And I say more Muslim environment because it's at least a more conservative, and therefore
sure.
it is, and it's also safer because you can walk around 11 p.m., 12 p.m. in Egypt, and it's fairly safe at night. You couldn't do that in many Western countries because it feels unsafe, especially a lot of cities. In London, you wouldn't want to walk around very late, right?
Really?
But but in Egypt you could. In Cairo you could. You know, you feel generally safe, or you could at that. You know, before things happened. You know, you could generally walk around feeling quite safe. And also there's the weather. It's nicer weather if you're coming from very cold climates. It's just nicer. People prefer it, especially the British people in particular. They prefer warmer climates if they can get it. So all of those things, come into play when you think about Egypt, and obviously post 2011 and everything. A lot of things have changed, right? And a lot of things have caused difficulty for the people there, and the impressions of of Egypt. But I don't think that's stopping a lot of people from going to Egypt or going to study there in some areas, even though they've lost respect for some things. But there are certainly changing opinions, right? I personally don't think Egyptians in particular should have a very gloomy idea of their situation too much, but rather focus on what they can do within their means at this point. Meaning, it doesn't stop you from being creative, to being innovative, and so forth. And those kind of things are important. I think also following your dreams. A lot of the education system in Egypt kind of forces you into certain places, but you might not want to be in that. So you can have someone who's driving a taxi, but really they're a scientist, or they want to be a comedian, but they're forced to become an engineer, or do you understand? So there are loads of scenarios in play that maybe culturally, or the system is in place that forces people to do something that they don't really want to do, or they don't have a passion for. But then sometimes you see people, they take that into their own hands in Egypt, and then they do what they love to do, right? And the more we do that, I think people will start to create more, generate more, and hopefully connect beyond their space, which is just Egypt, with people outside. That's what I think, really. Yeah.
I understand what you said about the creative part, and I mean, from pressure comes good things, like most people who have reached something in life was because of the restrictions and limitations that they had, and they had to fight through it. But my issue is actually two things. One thing is the Islamic restrictions in Egypt. They're very, very harsh. I mean, you could like probably the authorities look at me like I'm like a cute Islamic daawah or something.
Yeah.
So that's why they're not after me, or maybe because they can, because I'm Canadian. I don't know, but I mean, it's very, very restrictive in that manner. And this brings me to my second point, which is the recognition and the appreciation, which is something that you can actually reach, and you've reached it through being in London, for example. I took a look at your website and the awards you've won, mashallah, and you have been recognized as an artist, as a Muslim artist, This is not something that you can be recognized as in Egypt, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, Egypt is a very particular scenario, right? So, having lived there, I've got a deep connection with Egypt because my children are half Egyptian, right?
Okay.
So I know the situation where being an artist in Egypt, because of the cultural development over the last 100 years, has completely moved away from an Islamocentric artistic tradition to a very Western-centric one. So in the 1920s and 30s, you had great Western secular artists doing, I say secular in the sense that they were artists secular. It's not religious now. So throughout large parts of the 20th century. So this dictates a shift away from traditional Islamic leaning art and creativity to a more Western global style that's been done. I'm not going to knock it completely, because there's nothing wrong with that inherently, but just like many other countries around the world, the slow secularization that occurred with a lot of countries. I know in Egypt in the 70s you had a revival because a lot of the people who went abroad, they came back from Saudi Arabia and the Gulf and other places, and they brought back a resurgence of Islam, whether it was Salafi or Wahhabi or any other orientation. But the point being is, what happened with Egypt is that it now had an outlook. It had this impression that they needed to be, from an artistic side, Western or not necessarily inherently traditional at all, and there was a dislike of traditional arts. So things like calligraphy was the appreciation of it went down a lot more, right? Traditional arts, geometry, zakharif, all of this stuff became like craft work that had no real respect, right? And even in the West, this is considered craft. It's not considered art.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So you won't see galleries, contemporary galleries full of calligraphy and full of traditional Islamic leaning or traditional art as such, right? But you would find full of them contemporary art, historical art is there. So you'll find loads of great Persian work or even some Arab work, but paintings and sculptures and whatnot, but not calligraphy and so on.
It's interesting. I don't want to cut you off, but I just
Yeah.
want to add something because in Egypt, I'm sure you recognize this. The calligraphers are called khattat,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
this is something a guy you can call up to come and write a sign, and he's
Oh,
not
yeah,
really
exactly.
considered an artist.
Yeah, it's not. It's
And
just
and you stand in front of the thing, and you're like, how do you write this? Like this is not printed. I mean, you just wrote
yeah, yeah.
this, and he's
Yeah,
just
yeah, exactly.
he's like a
So you,
freaking
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So you'll notice that, the Khattats they had a lot of work back in the early the last century when there were a lot of black and white movies. So all of those stage comedies and all of those early films, black and white, all of those titles were done by hand, right?
Yes.
Um, but that's because they didn't use any digital work here, and or type. Everything had to be done. There was an appreciation still at that time because khat was always more of a higher quality than anything that could be printed, right? In Arabic, right?
Yes.
So, but that started to wane. So, come the 70s, 80s, digital tech started coming in, satellite TV. It was less and less of that. Now you have movies in Egypt, produced in Egypt with film titles and the scrolling text and stuff using fonts that try to look like calligraphy but are extremely bad. Like it's like it doesn't make sense for a culture and a country that is steeped in calligraphic art to then use a crappy, really nasty font that's trying to look calligraphic but is drawn extremely badly, right?
Yes.
It makes beggars belief, right? It makes no sense. So a lot of that, even the khayamiya tents, the you
Yeah.
have, even the craft of that is dying in Egypt, right? The people who make all of the stuff, because people they're losing appreciation for this. They're not developing it either. So there's two things. There's no further development, right? And there's lack of appreciation. So people build and make their, they want to decorate the they want
And,
to
and
make
it's a
it.
vicious cycle. I mean, yeah, because
Yeah.
it's not contemporary, so people don't like it, and then it increases to, or
Yeah.
decreases in popularity, and then people don't like it more. This is a very, it's a very harsh equation because, I mean, somebody in your position, for example, you appreciate design, and you know that branding it's very attractive when it's foreign, because then you have all the fonts and you can easily create a logo in English, and you have all these cool fonts and stuff, and it's globally recognized as cool, you know.
Yeah.
But then when you walk into the realm of creating an Arabic logo, you don't necessarily have all the fonts that you can use. I mean, I've searched for many fonts, and I'm a designer, so I like to create logos in Arabic, and I like to represent, but I find myself, I have to draw all my calligraphy, myself. But on the other hand, if you want to create an English logo, you don't really have to do that,
Yeah,
So
exactly.
do you have any ideas regarding this aspect of this versus this?
Yeah, this is my day-to-day work. That's what I do. I have to deal with this scenario. The situation is that, again, it goes back to history, right? You had late adoption of the printing press in the Middle East in general, right? There was a fear. People attributed it to fear of the printing press, that if there's mass communication, but it's really not. One of the main reasons was that Arabic is so hard to replicate in print form, in printed type form, right? Where you had to move all the letters into place and then do a print, right? With Latin, you could do it, but Arabic is so complex. You've got calligraphy. You can have one word in maybe at least 30 variations in that single word, in forms and different way you can write it, right?
Yes.
There's no other language like this in the world, right? No other calligraphic tradition like this in the world, right? So you can't make that. So there was a massive delay in trying to get this done. So by the time, people continue to do things by hand, write calligraphy and so on, whereas the other, in the Western world and other places, they, with their single, letters and so on, they could easily create fonts and letters and type. So even in the digital era, because a lot of the Arab countries were having their own problems in development, right? So they weren't developing as quickly because of post-colonialism. So they were occupied, and suddenly they're not occupied. Now they've got rule and dictatorships and all these other problems. So creative development, adoption of new technologies was very slow, right? And so only in the last 15 to 20 years did you have a big resurgence in Arabic type development, right? But only in the last 10 years did you get really good quality typography. But still, it's very difficult to replicate calligraphy, right?
Okay.
And so most designers who work with Arabic have to, or most good designers anyway, right, have to recreate all their Arabic type and recreate all their Arabic calligraphy, right? In the Latin design sense, you also still have to do a lot of typographic manual work as well, because not every font is perfect. You're going to have to always tweak stuff, and good designers will always do that. But in Arabic, it's always almost always from scratch, right? And then there's a problem that a lot of art designers try to mimic the look of Western type.
Yes.
Arabic is not a Western type, right? Yes, you can make it look more
Modern.
modern. You could say modern. I'm saying modern. There's a global sense of what design is, direction something is going.
Yeah.
But you can't lose the nuance, the what makes Arabic Arabic. It shouldn't look alien to an Arab. If you know what I mean. So it shouldn't look like it's trying to look like a Latin typeface, right? It should be easily readable and recognizable as an Arabic thing. And in fact, this is what's important, to try and be as unique in Arabic design, to retain that cultural identity, that uniqueness, right? And not try to become like the Western design traditions at every opportunity. So the same things happen in art, same things happen in clothing, same things happen in industry, infrastructure, and everything. There's a constant mimicry. There's always trying to be imitate the other, and maybe that's because of inferiority complexes.
Yes.
Also to do with, but it's also to do with technological development, right? And it's not just it's not limited to Egypt only. This is happening across the world, right? But you have cultures that are proud to be who they are. So the Japanese culture, a lot of what they do is somewhat still insular. They still have their own subcultures. They're still proud of doing the way they want to do things, right? And they have their own way of doing technology and design and so on. And likewise in parts of China and other places. So I fear that people eventually, just like some younger generation of Arabs find it difficult to speak Arabic properly because they're growing up in English schools and international schools and whatnot. They're on Instagram and other videos and whatnot, and they even have an accent now when they speak Arabic, because even though they're born and raised in Arab countries. So likewise, you might fear to see the fear of losing some of these traditions, appreciating Arabic calligraphy and traditional arts and so on. A good example I always say is that in a lot of these Western countries, they preserve their history, right? Their Islamic history, their Christian history, their non-Christian history, and so on. But in a lot of Muslim countries, some of that Islamic heritage, some of that non-Islamic heritage isn't always preserved properly, right? It's neglected for so long. By the time they start to preserve it, it's only because the UN said, oh, you should preserve this, or or another organization said that this is a historical of importance, right? Only then they start to take care of it. Otherwise, people used to pee outside of it. They used to urinate. I've seen people urinate outside beautiful sabila type thing, these sort of
mashrabiyya and stuff.
Mashrabiyya and stuff. Yeah, exactly, right. And you think, wow, how can this be let to go this bad, but it's just because people had moved away from that. They moved away from their history. And you'll see this in Egypt, but you'll see this in other countries as well. When people start to despair for their country, because of political reasons mostly, right?
Yes.
There's economic and political reasons, but they stop caring about their countries, the land where they live.
That's true.
To the point that they will throw the trash outside their door, right? Even though that street is yours and everyone else's, but they won't. But they'll clean their own house. Their house is clean, but right outside their door they'll throw the trash, right? Because for them that's not theirs. So why should they care?
Yeah.
Right. That attitude is completely wrong, right? And
I mean, it is. I mean, it is wrong, but I mean, like you said, people are pressured by the economic situation that they don't really think about this stuff. I mean, it's like, what the hell did this country ever do to me? You know, so like, I'll throw the trash or whatever. Let me get back to what you were saying. I mean, you touched upon many points. I'll start from last to first.
Mm-hmm.
When you said about like the children gaining an accent because of this and that and losing the connection to Arabic or their culture, I think when it comes to design and specifically Arabic, and this is something I wanted to ask you, maybe these people can come back to Arabic just because it's a unique edge for them, not necessarily because they want to represent Arabic. You know, some of us, and maybe you've tried it before. Maybe you've tried designing something in like Japanese or Chinese or something, right? Maybe, I don't know, but it's cool. Yeah. It's like, I mean, you don't have a connection to that, but I mean, it's a cool style.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, it has happened. I mean, I'm not. While I've said that, you have seen a significant change in the last 10 years because of the internet in particular. Suddenly, young kids are able to see Instagram or whatever other app they're using, Pinterest, and they're suddenly seeing all this amazing graphical work and art that's Arabic in many ways, but it's done differently, right? Now it's inspired a new generation of young people who are being self-taught. They're not being taught in school or college or university. They're teaching themselves at home. They're getting Photoshop and Illustrator and stuff like that, and they're trying to teach themselves and experimenting, right? And so you've got this new generation that is becoming prouder of what they're doing. That's why the t-shirt brands are coming out. You know, you did something. You know, NAS. You know NAS, right? So they've got the t-shirt stuff. But even before NAS did it, and even before I did that in Egypt, right? So I did a set of t-shirts that had Arabic graphics and stuff like that going on, and I launched it in Egypt as well. And you know, people hadn't at that point really seen anything like that. You know, it was really interesting. There's another story to that. I'll tell you. It became controversial, but I'll tell you that later. But the point being,
did you like use ayat or something?
I didn't, but one Egyptian newspaper thought that I did, or they wanted to create a story out of it. They said this British designer is putting Quran on clothes.
Which wasn't Quran.
Yeah, no, of course it was.
But
it was
they couldn't
abstract.
read it because
you couldn't read it. It was just abstract letters.
Yeah.
He even got an Azhari scholar, right, to give me to make a statement. You know, this if this is artist doing this haram, yani.
When was this?
2007 or something, right? 2007. I was in England, right, and I'm like, what's going on, right? And so I go on television, right? So there's a Egyptian TV channel, right? And the scholar's there on the other side, right? And I'm telling him, okay, this is the T-shirt. أين الآيات القرآن, right? And he's stuck because there's nothing there, right? إن جاءكم بنبأ فتبينوا, right? So, right? And so then he was like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. But that journalist wanted to create a story out of nothing. You understand, right? You know, there are bad people everywhere. But, you know, but that was that was the first time I did that stuff, right? Because when I went to Egypt, I wasn't seeing anything. There was only one other artist, designer in Egypt that was doing something really interesting with Arabic, but not to the extent that I still wanted to see it. He was a designer by the nickname Ganzir, right? Back in 2006 or so.
I think that was like graffiti, I think.
Yeah, it was like more graffiti and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, but you know, I was experimenting much more with stuff at the time because I wanted to make it look contemporary, modern, futuristic, all of that stuff, right? Because I didn't want it to look traditional, right? But I didn't want to lose the tradition of Arabic, you know. So I was like, I can make Arabic look cool, right? So
Yes.
that's my goal. So I'm gonna do cool stuff with it, right? And it was popular here because the younger generation of Muslims growing up, they had this connection with Arabic, even though they didn't know Arabic as a language. They knew it as a language of the Quran and
Yes.
religion. So for them, that's their connection. That's the connection. And to Arabs, it was like something new, bit different, bit unusual. And then it took off later on. Like 5 years after I did my thing, suddenly you got these brands coming out with cool t-shirts and stuff like that, you know. But now it's like everywhere, you know. Now you'll find stuff everywhere. But you know, prior to that, people weren't doing as much experimentation in that regard. People doing calligraphic experimentation. So you had some calligraphers in Tunisia. There was Munir Sha'arani from Syria, but he lives in Egypt. He was amazing. There's a Libyan artist here in the UK called Ali Omar Ramis, and another Tunisian, Najam Hadawi. They were doing experimental stuff. The Iranians were far ahead, right?
Yes.
They're a culture of art, right? So they were always experimenting with.
But it
even
wasn't
more.
Arabic, right? Like it was.
It's Farsi, but it's an Arabic script.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Arabic script, but it's in terms of the contemporary stuff. So they've got amazing designers and stuff. The problem in Egypt and other countries is that nobody taught, apart from Lebanon, right? Nobody really taught Arabic typography or calligraphy formally. No one taught calligraphy formally. The Turks did, right? And the Turks are the best calligraphers, in my opinion, in Arabic, right? And in Egypt, you had Madrasa Tahsin al-Khutut al-Arabiya in Bab al-Lu', right? But I think that closed down when I went, right? And they had like one little class or something every so often, right? And me and some Malaysian students and a few others used to go and try and learn, right? But it was already closing down and dying in Egypt at the time when I went, right? So the only other place, I think in Dubai or Qatar, they wanted to try and teach calligraphy, even though calligraphy wasn't a massive historical tradition for them, right? But in Lebanon they weren't teaching calligraphy. There are independent teachers. I remember I went to Syria once, and I went to the market, and there's a calligrapher in the market, but he was selling stuff, but he also had some calligraphy pieces. I said, "Are you the Khattat?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm the Khattat." And he goes, I said, "Like, do you teach?" He goes, "Who wants to learn?" Right? Because nobody wants to learn, right? He goes, "It was no point." He's like, he's given up, right? He's given up.
It's kind of like
right?
Assassin's Creed type stuff. Like, I will teach you the way, you know?
Teach you the way, yeah, exactly. So I'm like, you know, I want to be the Padawan, right? I want to be the disciple. So in Egypt, I was lucky to find some, you know, a teacher and teachers, and now in Egypt there's slight revival again.
I think so. Yeah. I
This
have a
is
few
to do
friends,
with this is to do with exposure. They're seeing it online. They're not seeing it in books. They're not seeing it in newspapers. They're seeing it online, and they think, "Oh, this is beautiful. I can do this." Right? They're seeing videos of people writing, and suddenly it's in your face. When it's back in your front of you, then you want to learn it, because you have to understand, television and mass media has tried to push this stuff away for a very long time, right? And so when it's not in front of you, you don't really appreciate it anymore. So younger generations are like, "Oh yeah, this is interesting. I can go and learn this." I have people from Egypt email me regularly, "Where can I go learn calligraphy?" I'm like, you're there already, right? There are khatatin everywhere, right? Everywhere, you know. Yeah, they may be doing other jobs, but you know, take some time and learn with them. It'll take you several years, but you will get there. Right?
So do you feel the I mean, I have two questions about this. Do you feel the burden of carrying, I mean, do you want to represent Arabic? Do you feel that this is something that's dying, and then you have this mission to bring it back, or something like this? Or is it just the style that you're using just to like, I kind of know the answer, but I want to know like your perspective on this. Or is it just a style that you're adopting so you can be unique, you know?
No, yeah, for me, it began back in when I was at university, right? So I'm at university. I'm studying art, and I'm frustrated with art in general because, you know, from a purely from a artistic point of view, I felt that a lot of art was just really egoistic. It's all about the artist, and all my work was all about other things, subjects, topics, politics, you know, that sort of stuff, right? And I thought that's why graphic design makes sense, because it can communicate on a different level, right? But and then it came to a point that okay, what kind of art do I put on my walls, right? That's reflective of me, but not about me. Does that make sense, right?
Yes.
So, you know, so when you come to Islamic art, that's the kind of art that talks like that. It's about you, but it's not about you, right? I mean, it's talking to you, but it's really glorifying something better and greater, and so on. It's a reminder. That's why I called my project Visual Dhikr, right? To be reminded visually by the work that you see, right?
It's very nice. Yeah.
You know, so but reminded of what? You know, reminded of what's greater, what's even, you know, what made you and what not, right? So
I like how you said the part where it's about something greater, but it's kind of like it's complicated. Like it represents you, but it's not about you. I really really like this.
yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, the artistic hand is maybe yours, right? If you made it, but the inherent message, may be talking to you, but it was said by someone else, or it reflects the wisdom, the infinite wisdom of what is greater, right?
Yes.
You know, and so that's where the beauty is, right? And that's the true beauty. So for me, when art can communicate on that level, right? Some art can give you a good feeling, right? It can give you a really beautiful feeling. That's nice as well, right? But something that can give you a message that you can walk away with, that's more life-changing at times, right? It's a subtle way, you know, it's not you know, that
Yes.
significant sometimes, but it can have that impact, right? So, but I couldn't find art that I couldn't afford the really nice stuff, right? That independent artists were making, right? Like some of the artists I mentioned earlier, these were calligraphers doing some really interesting stuff, but they were really expensive, right? They were selling this stuff for thousands, and there's only a handful of them. And even then, I didn't like some of the stuff that they were doing. And everything else is just the cheap, mass-manufactured stuff that they get from China, gold, calligraphy, you know, just made out of metal. It's just nasty stuff that you don't want to put up.
Yes.
You know, it's not respectful of the message, in my opinion, right? So I thought, if I make it, then at least I can put something up that I'll be proud of or I'll be happy about, right? So that's where it started. And so I started doing that calligraphic work, that design work, right? So, but I wanted to do something that wasn't traditional. I didn't want to be a traditional calligrapher, right? I can go and learn thuluth and nasakh and diwani and so on, but I would just be like hundreds of others who are out there who do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
But I wanted to say, okay, but I feel at the time, this is in 2000, 2001, 2002, and I'm feeling that this dying Islamic art and the tradition of Arabic design and calligraphy is dying. As a non-Arab, you know, even looking at Arabic design, it's like where is it going? It's dying almost, right? Maybe it's a wrong impression, but from an outside, that's what it felt like, right? And I thought, you know what? I want to help be part of the revival of this, right? And I'm going to experiment. I'm going to do stuff that's crazy. I'm going to break some of the rules. I'm going to do whatever I can to bring it to a modern look and feel and really experiment. And that's where it started. You know, maybe I won't say that now because there are younger people and people who are already doing something very, very similar. I mean, people come to me and say, oh, I saw your stuff and I'm doing it now as well. But now there's a lot more people doing it, right? But when I started off, there was hardly anybody doing it, right? And so I went to Egypt to study the calligraphy, so I at least had the foundation, so I know that I at least know the craft, right? And so I'm not doing it blind, right? You know?
Yes.
But what I wanted to do was constantly do something fresh and new and experiment. Make Arabic look very completely relevant, modern and futuristic at times, and wacky and crazy, because it can be, because it was more reflective of my identity, more reflective of modern Arab identity, and so on, right? And so, you know, it was primarily from a Muslim angle, but it wasn't exclusive to a Muslim scenario, right? Because Arabic is used by a lot of people who are not Muslim as well, and it can work in a secular context perfectly, right? And so that's where it came from, and that's what I always wanted to do. And that allowed me to really, really push forward and create stuff that others weren't thinking of at the time, you know? And I think some of that work that I did and some of that work that other people did in a similar guise over the years has influenced the newer generation. So when the newer generation look stuff up, they see our work, right?
Yes.
And they're influenced by it, you know? Some of them copy it, some of them steal it, right? You know, but, you know, I've seen my stuff on TV shows in Arabic.
Really?
In Egypt, right? For example, I've seen my stuff in TV shows. Like there's one TV show in Egypt, I think it was a comedy series or something, and they took a logo that I did in Arabic and they used it as
Really?
in the actual thing. Yeah, and there's another TV show in, I think, Abu Dhabi or Saudi, I can't remember, right? And they used the title design was one of my custom fonts, right?
Wow.
You know, and they just ripped it completely. And I see that, and you can't do anything about it. Even there was an IKEA in Saudi Arabia, right? And they had, in the IKEA, they were selling frames with my artwork in it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
You
That's,
know?
I mean, that's nice, but I mean, you're kind of happy, but you're like, what?
Yeah, like constant stuff like that, you know, happened over the years. You know, when I did the t-shirts, you know, there was people copied it straight away, you know, replicated it and started selling it. So, you know, there's, people, you can get appreciation, but it's really also, there are no rules in parts of the world, you know, when it comes to respect and rules of art and copyright. But that's the territory that you have to deal with.
Let me ask you this. I think it's a very important question for people who are convinced with what we're talking about and want to take a step towards actually creating something in Arabic and adopting that style. Is it necessary to actually study Arabic type? You know what I mean? Because not everybody has access to that. Not everybody has the time, and not everybody considers it a priority. I mean, I'm a designer. I'm a new designer. Am I going to spend 2 years learning Arabic type, or can I just buy some cool fonts? And you know what I mean? It's a very big dilemma.
Well, I think
part of it, and part of it has to do, I think, with, and I don't know if you've been through this like mentally or not, but the idea of diving into Arabic, because I do Arabic graffiti and I took a few courses on typography and stuff. And part of the reason I took the courses on typography and calligraphy is because I felt that I needed the validation of, I mean, if you come and ask me, what did you, I mean, why would you be doing this? I'd be like, because I spent, 6 months taking that course, So I have like the shahada of this in a way.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah. Look, for me, I when it comes to learning any profession, right? If you can get training and if you can go through a course, right, you will usually get a really strong foundation from a theoretical and practical point of view, right? It will give you the theory. A lot of the time, when it comes to design, there's a lot of logic and theory that goes into why you do certain things, right? And that can easily be missed when you're doing it by yourself, trial and error. So I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. You should definitely start doing it, start experimenting. But have the intention to try and learn from a professional course. And it does loads of workshops in many countries now, right? Even in Egypt, in Cairo, there's loads of workshops run by people like Muhammad Mahdi. There's many other people who I know who are doing amazing stuff. And it gives you an advantage, because what you do realize is when you're making decisions, when you're doing design, that you're doing it with the historical relevance, the nuance of what Arabic is and how it should look and form.
Yes.
There are many things to do with legibility, right? The rules of why something should be done because it looks better, right? There are tricks that you can employ that make it seem like it's proportional when it really isn't in actual measurement. There are all these little things that are really important. Knowing the tradition is extremely important, because for you to know how to move forward, you need to know your past.
Yes.
Right? So if you don't know your history, if you don't know the history of the craft, then you are going to make common mistakes, embarrassing mistakes that others will notice, right? And so where you can, however much possible, watch online, read books, go to workshops, because if as a designer, if you're not learning, you're
Yes.
not developing, right? You're not developing, because you can be in a bubble. The worst thing you can do as a designer, be in a bubble, because people around you won't know what's good or bad. The average person, I have this experience every day. I send my work to an Arab client. They can't tell the difference between good calligraphy and bad calligraphy. They can't.
True.
They can't tell the good difference between a good font in Arabic and a bad font in Arabic, because they just don't know, right? And the same with Latin design. A lot of average people, they don't know good design from bad design, right? And so you have to explain to them, this is more traditional. Sometimes I do something in traditional calligraphy, but the Arab client can't read it, or they think it's a mistake. And I think, no, this is traditional Arabic calligraphy. You're supposed to have this, or you can have this, or you can do this. Look, and I have to give them historical references. Look, this is example, because they grow up with so much modern design or Western design that they have not observed enough calligraphy to recognize something should be done in the right way, right? So knowing that allows you to develop. So if you start experimenting with new stuff, new styles, new scripts, new fonts, then at least you're borrowing from tradition to develop. You need a platform to start with, right? The problem is the platform that we have now that you can get off the shelf, which is fonts that you can download for free. They're of such bad quality. You're starting at a low quality level. You don't want to do that. That's like, in an English sense, you're starting with Comic Sans, trying to do a nice cursive script. It's the wrong way of doing it, right? And so, even Western typography developed from originally calligraphy, handwritten work that became cursive script, and then they developed it. Even modern type was considered in Latin modern type, like Helvetica and stuff like that. It was considered grotesque, meaning it's ugly and nasty, because it's too geometric and simple and humanist. It wasn't liked by people, but people experimented with these kind of new looks and feels, but they did it with the understanding of what typography should be, how it looks when it's printed, because when designing something, it can look completely different when it's printed, when it's scaled down to a very small size, or when it's blown up, right? Because you can see all the flaws when it's blown up. When it's very small, things can become blurred and smudgy and so on. So all of these rules you won't learn just by observing, right? You will only learn either from a book, from a teacher, or from a workshop, right? And you can do a lot of that online now, right?
Yeah,
you can take courses online. Some of the rules that apply to Latin typography do apply to Arabic in many ways, but with Arabic you still need Arabic calligraphy tradition, understanding of it. Even if you don't do it yourself, you need to understand it, right? Because so much of it's still used, right? And you'll see in the Middle East in particular, like Gulf and the region, Qatar and places like that, there's a desire to always use Arabic calligraphy more and more, because they're always trying to show off their Arabic culture, right? But Egypt has a stronger calligraphic tradition than Saudi Arabia does. Iran has even more stronger calligraphic tradition than Arab countries, right? Because that's where those were the regions that actually calligraphy really, really developed, more than so. But it doesn't mean that we have to stick to traditional scripts, so we can start experimenting. So that's what I started to do. So for me, I didn't want to do just traditional scripts. I thought, I want to make Arabic calligraphy relevant and contemporary and unique, even if I have to call them British Arabic scripts, because I'm developing them here. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And I deliberately call it that because we're doing it here, right? And it should be recognized as such, because some of the influence is from Western calligraphic tradition, some of the designs, some of the styles, and other styles are influenced by Japanese culture. Some of my typography early on in Arabic was influenced by Japanese design, right?
Wow.
Heavily, right? So, and I will give acknowledgement to that stuff, but I will still try and claim it to be Arabic, and I did stuff when I was in Egypt as well, at the time.
Okay. Who's your favorite designer currently? or calligrapher, I mean, typographer.
There's so many. Well, in terms of Arabic, there are some
Yep.
amazing typographers at the moment. There are people like Pascal Zorbi from, I think he's originally from Lebanon. There's Christian Sarkis, and his wife, I think Lara. They're great typographers. I think you've got people like there's a bunch of other people who've preceded them. Even Munir Sha'rani, he's a typographer also originally, but he's a calligrapher. And so these are the kind of people who, in terms of Arabic, are doing amazing things. Pascal Zorbi may be one of the best in terms of Arabic type development. He's doing amazing work. But there are young people. There are a couple of people in Egypt. I think there's a young designer who's studying currently under Munir Sha'rani in Cairo. His name is Muhammad Hadi, right? He's excellent in terms of Arabic typography and calligraphy. Like, he's mixing the both, and he's developing Arabic type work, right? He's also looking at traditional calligraphy and typography and reviving some aspects of it. Amazing designer. And you'll see people like that locally in Cairo who are doing amazing stuff. There are other designers in Cairo who are emerging also, who are doing interesting stuff. There's another guy called Hadi. He's also doing interesting experimental Arabic typography. But there are many Western and global designers. I'm not going to mention all of them because there's so many people doing interesting stuff. I think younger generation of people are not so well known, but you'll find amazing designers on Behance and places like that. Sure. Where they just got amazing portfolio, but they're not well known because no longer are they pushed into the public sphere like the previous artists and designers. These days, the online is the playing field.
True. Is there anybody that gets you super jealous?
I'm still jealous of Munir Sha'rani because he was doing this back in the 50s. Think about that. This guy, he's from Syria. He's experimenting with Arabic type and calligraphy since the 50s. Wow. Right? He'll take like Diwani or Kufi, and he'll start experimenting and doing new variations of it in his own style. He's got his own script, right? So when I thought I was being experimental and original, I find this guy, I'm like, what? Right? Like, wow, right? The guy been doing this for decades, right? He's celebrated, like he's got exhibitions and stuff like that. But the Arab world hasn't adopted a lot of that stuff, right? He hasn't got many students, so he's not able to teach many people, right?
Yeah.
So he's not experimental. It's not abstract stuff like other calligraphers and non-calligraphers.
I think it has to do. I mean, to a certain extent, you have to be a bit commercial, or you have to be a good branding guy. Like
absolutely.
El Cid, for example. You know him, of course.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
His legibility and readability is not on point at all. I think. I mean, you can't really read what he said, what he does, but he's very successful in that he's made his stuff very commercial, and he's very, very good at branding. He's a good business guy. He knows what to do. He has some very good communication skills. He can go and draw on a wall. I mean, this guy versus Munir, I mean, of course Munir is very, very immersed, but this guy's like, he knows how to bring it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but you judge things as they are, right? So I would never compare El Cid to Munir, right? Because they're in two different spheres, right? So, when Munir Sha'rani, in terms of craft and skill, is well in advance of what maybe El Cid is creating. El Cid, Habibi, don't hate me. I'm just saying, I'm not criticizing him. He probably wouldn't call himself a calligrapher. He'll call himself an artist or a graffiti artist, right?
Calligraphy, to be specific.
Yeah, calligraphy, right? But he really knows how to present his work. He knows where to place it for impact, for meaning, for all of those things. Even if you couldn't read it, it's just beautiful in its own right? And it's not for art's sake, but it's for that purpose, right? And so it's difficult to commercialize some of that, as decorative work possibly, but it's difficult to otherwise commercialize it in the sense that it would be taught as a style for generations to come or adopted as a script and so on, where Munir's work would be certainly probably adopted as a script style and whatnot. They're two different spheres of work. And then you've got the typographers, and they're doing something completely different, right? Lebanon is a bit of a hotbed of great typographers because they deliberately focused on the continuation of Arabic typography learning. They're the ones that, the Christian Lebanese, they're the ones that probably one of the early ones that actually took the printing press, and actually started printing the Bibles and whatnot, right? In Arabic, right? And so they still have a tradition of maintaining a sense of design. They're the only ones that had for a very long time an actual degree or courses in Arabic typography, right? When I was in Egypt, at the time, there was no such thing, right? I don't know if there is now an official course in Arabic typography at a university level, right? But
I don't
I've
think so.
I've not heard of it. But I think in Dubai or in Qatar, there is one or two universities that are teaching it, right? But even then, it's probably just a syllabus within a year, right? Not a long-term thing. So there's more Arabic typography workshops in the West. I went to one in Amsterdam. There's some in London and other places in America now. So what I'm saying is, yes, you do need to understand branding. You need to understand how to promote it.
Yes.
One advantage that you will see, and if you go to Instagram today and Pinterest, Instagram in particular, you'll see people showcasing their work, themselves. They're filming themselves, they're taking pictures of their work, they're showing off. There's an immense amount of experimental, beautiful, contemporary Arabic and traditional typography and calligraphy happening right now. And because your platform is now your phone, right? You don't need to wait for TV channels to come and talk to you or newspapers to come and talk to you. And that the game has changed, right? So I think now there's more of a level playing field, right? Now it'll come down to quality of work.
Okay.
Quality of work will now matter, right? And that's the most important thing in my opinion. There's a lot of people experimenting, a lot of people making a lot of mistakes, fundamental mistakes, right? Now, the way I see it is, if you're an Arab and you're designing something in your own language, there should be very little mistakes in what you do, right? I'm not saying there shouldn't be any mistakes, but there should be very little mistakes. Like there shouldn't be fundamental mistakes. Like this is wrong. There's nothing, that letter should not be written or drawn like that, and so on, right? There are also problems with design bubbles that people live in, right? So if you show your work only to people around you, especially people who don't know anything about design, they'll think it's amazing. Wow, mashallah, they think it's amazing. But show it to another designer who knows the craft, then they give you real feedback.
Yes.
Right? And so people need to get out of their bubble, right? And not be afraid of showing their work to directors, creatives, and other designers and so on. And putting their work on an international platform. Even non-Arabs will not necessarily know the good and bad. They will think it's amazing. Oh wow, amazing calligraphy, but they won't know that it's really badly written or drawn, right? So you've got to find mentors. You've got to find people that you can talk to or similar platforms and get feedback, learn from each other. Otherwise, you're going to continue to make mistakes, right? And I've seen major branding work for major brands, right? Huge events with mistakes. I mean, I did a project in a big city, right, in the Gulf, and the logo that they ended up choosing, it wasn't my work, they chose someone else's work, had linguistic mistake. The Kufic had mistake. They actually had letters missing. Oof. When I pointed it out to them, and they said, "Oh, it's too late now. We've printed it and we've made signs and this is an event." I said, but you're Arabs. You at least read the work, right? Do you understand? But someone created that, right? And they fundamentally made a flaw in the Kufic design as well as the spelling, right? It's beggars belief, right? So these I see this constantly. Like, I mean, some of the major logos, like the Emirates logo, Al Imarat, right?
Yeah.
It's got a significant typographic mistake. Because
Really?
if you read it, if you read it next time, look at it closely. It'll say Al Imarata almost, because it looks like the ta with the goes up. It looks like an alif at the end, right?
Okay.
And that's a fundamental mistake, right? Like typographic mistake.
But it just looks good.
It just looks good.
Yeah.
Most Arabs won't even notice it because they don't look at those details, right? It's a typographic mistake, but they allow it. Sometimes they will allow it because what can we do, right? But you see these kind of things, right?
Yeah, I just brought it up right now, and it does, because the alif of the meme alif of al-imarat, the ta really it I mean it might actually be even longer than the.
Yeah, so it looks like an alif, right? It's
Yeah.
It, and it's you never have it like that anyway. But like, it's just wrong. You can't. If it's an alif, then the ta is disconnected from the previous. Like it doesn't work, right? So the ta, it shouldn't be a ta. It should be ta, right? There's no alif after that, right?
Yeah.
But they try to make the design work, but you're now breaking the Arabic.
Wow.
Fundamental mistake. Nobody notices.
Yes.
Right? Right? So that's the difference between someone who's had some training and learning as opposed to someone who hasn't. You can be self-taught. Absolutely can be self-taught, right? I believe in that. But you have to take the initiative in forcing yourself to learn constantly. Look at stuff closely. Just because it looks nice enough, it'll pass. No, that's not enough. You need to be the best.
Yes, and I think it comes down to that. I mean, generally, if you want to be good, if you want to be great, not just in Arabic type or in any aspect, you have to learn. Yeah, you just have to know the thing.
It's constant learning. It's like if you're a programmer, if you work in tech, you've got to constantly learn about technology and development and so on, right? In design, you've got to learn about trends and so on. But you always be better at your craft, right? What you did 10 years ago is probably got full of mistakes, right? To what you do now, right? But if you're still making the same mistakes, then you haven't learned, right? And I see it all the time. I see constant work coming out of the Middle East, in other places as well. And people are making fundamental mistakes. They're using really, really bad fonts, illegible fonts. They're trying to cram too much into a concept. They forgot, like in design, there's theory of design where you do minimalism and you put the least amount in. You put everything in and you take stuff out and you keep it. Does it still work? All of these theories are, they're part of design theory as opposed to, craft. Or it's not about the tool. It's not about what tool you use, what software you use, right? It's about understanding why you would do something. Why you would leave space somewhere, negative space, proportionality, using grids, alignment. When you put something right in the bank center, visually it can look off, so you drop it down a little. That's a trick that you do in design, right? Because visually, and so for example, you have the head of a meme. If you drop it below the line, the baseline, from when you look at it again, it looks like it's even, but actually it's actually below the line, the baseline, because you do it deliberately. These are tricks that you won't know why they do it. You might copy it. No, I'm going to do that because I see it in every other font, whatever. But you won't know why they do it.
It has a purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, you need to know the purposes and reasoning behind it.
So let me ask you this: is it a priority for you to focus on readability? I mean, legibility. We understand that. I mean, you're completely focused on this, but readability, does your stuff have to be readable?
Yeah, it depends on the context, right? So some work is artistic, it's decorative, right? At which point you don't need to make it readable, right? You can use abstract forms, you can use actual meaning, but you can make it in such a way that it makes it more difficult. So, artistic work, decorative work. But when you're doing something like a brand logo, when you're doing something for communication purpose, absolutely you need to make it legible, right? Because it needs to be readable. I've seen logos where, and identities where the Arabic has become almost illegible. They have to then put another version of the Arabic below it, right? So the calligraphy says the same thing, but it's like just purely artistic. But then it makes no sense to do that, right? You know, for some people, you know, they don't read the Al Jazeera logo. Some people, right? If they look closely, they can make out all the letters and it's, oh, okay, right? But most people just hear the name. They put the channel on Al Jazeera, right? And so they know it. They don't even have to read the logo anymore.
Yeah.
But in Latin, you have to put it in English below it, right? They have to put it below it, right? Now, there are some people who can't actually read it, even in calligraphic form. They just struggle a little bit, right? Because they're so not used to it anymore, right? So legibility has to be done based on context. What are you doing it for? You know, who the target audience is. You know, so you can have a design that might not be relevant to the target audience because, to be honest, they're mostly non-Arabs, right? And for them, they're just going to see it as decorative, right? So at that point, do you do something more decorative? Do you do something more experimental? Because it won't matter, you know. So everything has to have a context. Your project will dictate, the client will dictate, the target audience will dictate exactly what you should do and you shouldn't do.
Let me get on to another topic, which was very interesting to me because I didn't know before you actually told me that you were co-founder to Islamic Design House.
Yes.
I had no idea. And you can't really find that online, like you said. I mean, are you like, is it something you're trying to hide or?
No, I'm not hiding. I'm not involved in the day-to-day anymore. So Islamic Design House is a brand that began in London. You know, my friends who are similar mindset, we got together and we decided to form a modest fashion brand for in women's clothing primarily initially, and it started off taking your typical jilbab or abaya and making it you know, contemporary, kind of like bring in diesel or G-Star and jalabib, right, and just sort of like, you know, mixing the two and just making it more Western and contemporary and cool, right? And it took off. It really took off, you know, and the business grew. Multiple branches. There are multiple websites. I think we just launched and opened one in India. Now India is a different environment to crack, right? So, but we've got a branch in Emirates.
What do you mean you think?
No, because India is a very big mix of people, right?
No, and you said I think we just opened one in India.
Yeah, no, we did. We definitely did, right? Open a, sorry. No, I meant we've got a branch in Sharjah. We've got in Cairo. We've got a branch in Cairo. I think Mall of Arabia. And we even had we had our factory in Egypt at one point, right? But we had to move it to India.
Because it's cheaper or what?
It's just the manufacturing process was much easier for us. It just, for many reasons, various reasons, it didn't work out in Egypt. But so we opened a branch in India just yesterday, actually. In Hyderabad, right? So there's like, I think 7 branches worldwide. There's one in Palestine, one in Nigeria, right? So like it's all over the world to some degree, right? Because the appeal is there, you know. Modest fashion has taken off in general, right? So there's Modernisa in Turkey. There's many modest brands in the UK and in America and Canada. And so, but I became, after a while, I focused on other projects, you know. So I had my own design agency, so and focusing on that, and rather than focusing on this, and the guys are running it, they're doing amazing work with it. It's an interesting, you know, business in its own right.
Okay, I'd like to get into this if you don't mind, because it's very beneficial for me personally, because I have a clothing brand, as you might know.
Sure.
You started making fashion for women.
Yeah.
How was that like, considering that, I mean, you might not know how to design something for women specifically. I mean, what was that like?
So I think we have a team of people, a number of people, so that we have. So there's, from a creative branding, marketing point of view, there was me, there was other people who are in technology, and there are a couple of people, 3 people who are have already had developed garments and fashion, and so they came from that background. and they brought that knowledge on board, right? And so we already had prototyped and tested a range of clothing in that guise, or in that sort of approach, and it seemed to have appeal, because before that it was just black abayas and people were wearing Asian clothing or traditional clothing, or they were importing Moroccan clothing or whatever, right? So because they wanted to, Muslims in the UK in particular wanted to wear modest clothing, but there wasn't many options. There was a lot of options that were look very foreign, and they didn't really suit their cultural style or a more modern style. And so suddenly we experimented. We literally thought, how would we want to see this kind of clothing? And we were asking women, a lot of girls and a lot of people who were buying stuff and making stuff themselves. We were asking, getting feedback from them of what they would like to see, right? And when we started producing some of the stuff, it was like hit and miss. There was trial and error, the material, the quality of material. So we thought we were doing something really great, and then they were like, no, the material is rubbish. It's just not good enough. I wouldn't pay that much money for it. But they liked the overall cuts and the designs and the shapes and that were coming out of it. And it solved a problem for them at the time. And then that grew. And so then we got professional designers on board, right? Who were just focusing on doing this. And fashion business development people who had degrees in fashion industry, right? And these people helped us, raise the bar, essentially. But it's a costly affair. It's a very high cost to do this kind of work.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to ask you. I mean, you said you brought in people. I mean, at what point did you start bringing in people, and how did you pay for that?
Well, it's literally the business. Business went through initial funding that we were putting in our own money. Everyone was essentially working voluntarily, right? So everyone was giving professional work. Most of the people working had other jobs in the city as IT people or designers or whatever, right? But they put time in to make this work. Eventually, it came to a point while it was making money in these sort of low production cycles. We realized that in order for us to raise the bar, we need a lot more funding. So a lot of money was borrowed and invested into the business to try and get it off the ground. But you're talking about, much higher amounts of money up front, to get this kind of production numbers. It's not something a single person on their own could just do. You're talking about huge amounts of money. So you need to bring in more and more people and more funders to try and get the work out there, the production out there. And so it's not an easy thing to do, because within that I also did the t-shirt range, and I also did other products, but some of that could only be done once we saw the potential value of doing it. The money had to be made, but it's not to say that the brand is making huge amounts of money. It is doing okay, but it took many years. You're talking about over 10 years to get to the stage where it is, right? So it's been a long time.
2009?
It was 2008, I think. 2008, 2009, 2008, around that time. But it's been a hard slog. It's been a long time for everyone. I think I had to go into about 5 years before significant funding and changes and plans occurred, and then constantly changing the business plan and the structure, trying new things constantly. It's a constant learning curve. It's not, and I think we're still learning. The guys are still working away and finding the right route. New territories. We realized quite quickly that in the Arab world, it's a completely different market, right, than in the West, right, and different from Malaysia and other places, because there wasn't a desire for that kind of modest clothing of that particular style in the Arab world in that same way, and the spending power wasn't the same in different countries. So what you would sell in the Gulf is completely different from what you would sell in Morocco or Egypt, right? It's completely different markets. And in the Gulf, where the abaya dominates, right? Suddenly having these really cool, bright colored, jilbabs and is a completely different thing, and it doesn't really go with the what people are used to, right? And it's certainly more of a challenge in places like Saudi Arabia, right? And in Lebanon, it wouldn't work at all, you know, to a
Yeah,
large
yeah.
extent, because it's a different culture. So you got to know where you're going. But it
Does
took
it
off
work
in
in
places.
Egypt? Does it work? I mean, because
It
I've
works
been,
with.
yeah, I've been there with my wife a couple of times, and the clothing is, I would use the word sporty.
Yeah, so there's a really sporty look to it, because that's where it started originally. There's an urban sporty look, right?
Yeah.
Now it's expanded. There's more mid-range stuff and there's higher range stuff, but it's still in that sort of younger, everyday wear sort of clothing. But yeah, it's not for everybody, right? In Egypt, there was different phases of fashion, right? So let's just say pre 2011, there was Amr Khalid sort of phase when you had all of that. A lot of people became a lot more religious, especially from the middle to upper classes in Egypt, and they had a choice. Do I wear traditional clothing? Do I wear this modern style sporty look, or do I use regular fashion but look baggy and layer up, and do loads of interesting stuff with hijab and stuff like that? So we saw all of those things, right? So we thought, okay, yeah, this phase was perfect. The generation is perfectly right for this sort of work. But then post what's happened, things have changed a little bit. People are not willing to be overtly. They want to be modest, but they can be modest with skirts and they can, long tunics and so on, right? They don't have to wear abayas. They don't have to wear, different types of looser, full head to toe clothing. They don't need to do any of that, right? Or they don't want to do it because they're afraid of being marginalized, right? So everything's changed, right? So we saw a difference in Egypt because of that. Right, so maybe it doesn't work with everybody in Egypt anymore. It doesn't work with. It only works with a very small subset of buyers. But we see it differently in Nigeria. Nigeria is different. Suddenly, there's like a significant love of this stuff. Like it's like this flying off the shelves.
Nice.
There's significant interest in India, right? Because they've never seen that kind of stuff before. It's completely new to them, right? But it's hard to say how it's going to be in Indonesia and Malaysia. So it's a beautiful challenge. It's really interesting and fascinating. If you're an anthropologist, if you love culture and history and societies and how they work and mindsets, but you cannot do a business without knowing who you're talking to and what's happening in that. So a significant change in politics in a country can ruin your business because it changes the way people think, and buy and all that sort of stuff. But it's also can be to do with, you might miss the mark. You might not understand that in a certain country people don't dress like that.
Exactly. How do you test that?
Well, you gotta sample. You gotta go to shops. You gotta say, look, could you house this in your shop? Can you try selling this? See how it moves. See if it moves at all. So you gotta experiment. You gotta really go out there. Would you buy this? Like we did something interesting. We said, okay, in Egypt people have to go to the shop and buy it. Mail order or ordering online isn't a big thing, right? So how do you do that? And people, you buy clothing online. People are not even used to buying regular things online, let alone clothing, right? In the UK, we order a lot of people buy stuff online. I buy most of my clothes now online. It gets delivered to me, right? I try it on. If it doesn't fit, put it back in the bag and I post it back, right? You just drop it off somewhere and it's for free, right? There's no cost to that. And I keep what fits me and I return what doesn't fit me, right? That concept didn't really exist at all in Egypt when we went there, right?
Sure.
In 2011, 2009 sort of stuff. I think it was then or something like that. I can't remember. We devised a plan. Okay, we'll have people deliver the clothes to your door with your size and a size lower and a size higher. Go in, we'll wait outside, try it on, and then give it back to us in the door, right? So you can try it on the spot, but we do it at your door, right? Our driver will wait outside. So we devised this system and it worked, right? So no one was doing that, but we knew that there were guys on scooters everywhere, right? On bikes that would go, I remember otlub.com and others, right? Back in the day, right? We lived off it, right? As Westerners, we like otlub.com, right? Right? And so, for us, we had to devise a way to work with that system, right? It's expensive though,
Yeah, definitely.
and our garments were of a higher price point as well. So it wasn't sustainable, you know. So you have to work with the market, test it, and see if it works. Ultimately, we realized that Egypt isn't a market with this particular line of style of work, clothing, and you wouldn't do so. There may be other stuff that we will introduce that will work. And so over time, we're going to introduce more and more interesting stuff.
So
It was
so, so
different.
yeah,
It was different in Jordan, right?
Go
So
ahead,
it was
sorry.
in Jordan. It was different. It was successful. In Palestine, it was different. It was successful, right? I think we had two branches in Jordan. I think we still have them. I can't remember, but two branches in Jordan, right? So it was working in that in that country. But to me at time, I thought Jordan and Egypt aren't that different. But then they are at the same time, right? So you've really got to know your locality, the environment, the cultural impression that people have, the class of people that are buying the clothing, right, and what they typically spend. How is it perceived to be a religious person in those countries, and how it comes across, and all of those things matter, and that also influences the design as well. So it's you are not a designer. When you're a designer, you are not just a designer who works on a screen or on paper or whatever. You need to know your history, know culture, know artistic and cultural history as well, right? Know the people, know the environment, know the politics, right? Then you're an all-rounded designer, all-rounded creative. Only then do you really fully have you limit the mistakes that you make. Not absolutely, but you will always make mistakes, and that's fine. But you limit the mistakes as much as possible.
So you started off as the brand director or marketing guy, right?
Yeah. So yeah.
And how did your position evolve over time?
So initially it was everything from branding, from the creative marketing, the general art direction, and also influencing the design approach to the clothing. But eventually I moved away from the actual designing of the clothing or focusing on that, focus purely in the online sphere, the marketing and the branding side of things, even the store designs and stuff like that. So I laid down foundations for a lot of that, and then we brought in younger designers to try and fill in those gaps where they had to do day-to-day work. But eventually I couldn't do the day-to-day work. It was something that I had to move away from. But it's important to try and establish guidelines or rule book and a design language, to a brand,
Yes.
but not be stuck in it and let it evolve, right? So what we were doing 10 years ago doesn't apply anymore. Technology changed as well significantly, right? So you went from having just a website, now suddenly having social media websites, right? And that changed things rapidly, right? And so people were seeing your stuff online. So it went from seeing them in mail shots, right, to seeing them as videos now and Instagram and creating stories. So we saw a significance in when we started telling stories. We started putting the context of the clothing that's been designed in London, because they were London-based designs. These are London designers working on stuff that's influenced by British culture and design, right? So suddenly that appealed to people, right? So that's taken into consideration in terms of branding and how you present yourself and so on. So those things were important. So you have to understand the psychology, the mindset of who you're talking to, and how that can appeal. It's not enough to have just good design or clever messaging, right? Or funny messages. So all of these things can work, and you don't really know which way it's ultimately going to go. No one can predict how something's going to go, whether it's going to be survive or it's going to be a struggle or easy. And I've seen that in different projects, like my prayer mats, right? So I'll come into that later. But again, it's like you don't know which way something's going to go.
So how long did it take you to realize that because I'm kind of going through that same phase right now, or I have been going through it for a while, where the company's kind of growing, where we want to hire some people and stuff, and I'm at that phase where I do the marketing, I do the design, I do all that, but I can't really do the day-to-day. So how long did it take you to realize this and actually take action and say, well, guys, we need to bring on some people?
Yeah, so I think the point at which you look, it will start as soon as you feel that it's affecting your life beyond work, right? If you're working stupid hours, then it's already affecting you, right? Right? There needs to be a work-life balance, right? If it's affecting your salah, if it's affecting your family life, then it's already harming you, right? So you got to realize that and stop and think, okay, you know what? Can I offload some of this? Can I not be too protective over this and let some things go? And bring someone else on, let them do this design work, train them up, or can they do admin work and so on. Initially, you can start small. You can have to hire somebody for once a week or twice a week or part-time or someone offshore, abroad because it's cheaper, all of these things need to be taken into consideration, right? To try and alleviate the workflow. But all the while, you must understand that if you bring someone else on, you relieve yourself, but you work more efficiently, right? So improving your process, that's the most important thing. So yes, I brought someone on, but we're going to increase the output, so we're going to increase the marketing now, because before I couldn't do any marketing, right? I could do it once a week or once a month, but now I can do it weekly, or I can do it every other day, because now some of that work I was doing before is now on that person, right? So you're going to see the benefit of why you're doing it, right? And so without the marketing, you're not going to get enough people seeing your work, and not enough people are going to buy it. So there's a cycle. You got to get it right. And so I've got to put my 2 feet into that. And a lot of the times you have to hold down another job and do this. You can't always do it full time, right? So you got to hold down a full time job elsewhere, or a part time job elsewhere, whatever, and still do this on the side, because that might last you for years.
Yes.
Don't ever, in my opinion, don't ever let a dream concept take over, right? I've got to have an office, I've got to have the studio, I've got to have the latest computers. Then I look the part, I look like I'm working, when in reality you're just draining resources, right? So what? I'll work out of a bedroom, right? I'll hire somebody, I'll hold down a regular job, and I'll do this in the evening, or I'll do this on the weekend. Do you understand? There's nothing wrong with that, right? And that's how people started off. I mean, I'm not going to say Steve Jobs did it from a garage and Bill Gates did it from a garage. Yeah, but they did. IBM did it from a garage, because they started like that, right? But we should not be afraid of doing it, right? Even in my studio, in my agency, we had office spaces at times, and then at times we didn't have office spaces, because sometimes it was useful, and then because it was useful and then useless. We had office spaces, but hardly anybody was going in, because it was easier to work remotely, right? I was traveling so much myself that I would work from home, right? And so that changes, right? It's more about efficiency and learning to work faster but more efficiently and not lose the quality. That's the most important thing. But sometimes you can drop some quality to get momentum, right? But not so much that it's recognizable or noticeable by people, right? That's the most important thing.
I'm guessing it took you a very long time to actually surrender to this concept, right?
Very long time. It's still hard. It's still very hard to do. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It's hard. I even also had too many hats. I was doing so many different projects. I had a daawah project that I did, right? I had another organization I was part of. I did political work. Like I had I had IDH, I had visual dhikr, right? And I was doing my own artwork, and I was running the business. It was just too much going on. Yeah. Sometimes you have to stop stuff and just focus on one thing, right? And just get that one thing right, and then that's when it takes off, right? And it won't work if you're out of the picture. So you can start something, a great idea, and then you leave it, and then it just fizzles away. And that happens. Not everything is going to work as well. Like, not all your ideas are going to be successful. So you will have times where your project will start, but you'll realize that it's not working. You can give up on it, or you can try again, but there's no harm in trying something new, right? And or allowing it to fail, because something's not work.
But the business currently does not depend on you. I mean, if you completely take off, I mean, it's still gonna keep rolling.
Yeah, absolutely, because the system's got enough people in there at the level that they need to operate to function well. to without me. So if I was out of the picture, it would be perfectly fine.
Yeah, the stores that you guys have, mashallah, all over the world, are they franchises or you guys actually, they're yours?
So most of them are franchises, right? So a lot of these people who made the franchises, those stores, they had either previously ordered or wholesale the product, or they had it in their own store, and then they wanted to adopt the IDH brand, right? And the language and the stories and all of that stuff that comes with the franchise. In many cases it's recognizable, and some cases it's completely a new thing in that territory. But those people are willing to invest money, get a retail unit, decorate it, and push that branch out, and they obviously they are then buying the product to sell in those locations. There are different models, but it's mostly franchise.
Okay. I want to ask you about actually the branding of the company, because this is something I go through and I think about a lot. The Islamic product, or actually considering Islam as a product, because you guys are very bold in stating that Islamic design house, and then in your slogans and in your descriptions, you're like, this is for the modern Muslim so and so, so
Yeah.
representing something completely Islamic like this, is this, how did that work out for you guys?
So in the Western context, in the sense, when you're working to a Muslim community in the West, it's not unusual. There's a very, in the West, both in America and the UK and Canada, and Europe, there's a very bold identity amongst Muslims, right? Openly being Muslim and Islamic, right? And it's not seen as by and large, it's not seen as a backward or ancient or irrelevant identity, right? In fact, the younger generations were born in the UK, born in Europe and in the West, they embrace their religious identity, even though their parents may or may not have been that religious or are culturally Muslim, right? A lot of younger generation Muslims who were born in these countries, they found Islam again, right?
They need to identify.
Exactly. And whether that was because of circumstances, because of racism, because of whatever reason, they began to learn Islam to the point that they knew more about religion than their parents did.
Yes.
By the time they were teenagers, right? And a lot of them learned Arabic language, and a lot of them went into studies formally. We have madaris in Islamic seminaries in the UK that have been there for 40 years, with graduates like an Azhar model in the UK. There's multiple of them, right? They've been there for years, right? There's some in France, there's some in Canada and America. So religion was seen as a strong identity, as something to be proud of. And so when we were naming and branding, we're targeting this audience. This audience doesn't shy away from the fact that they're Muslims.
Yes.
However, that same name and branding doesn't sit so well in other countries because that same impression isn't employed. So in Malaysia, it's fine, because in Malaysia, the people are, again, there's a revival of faith and identity as Muslims, right? And people around the world adore the Malaysians for it, right? But parts of the Middle East, that it's something to be shying away from, be it political reasons or cultural reasons. And it's not just always political. Some of that is purely cultural. Like, oh, this is backward.
It's not cool.
Why? Yeah, it's not cool. It's just not trendy. I'm a modern, Arab. I'm a modern Turk. I'm a modern, all this sort of stuff. And I watch Western stuff. I speak English.
Yes.
What's this? This ancient religion you assign yourself to. That has, it's not cool. It's just, even in Asia, it's like this, right? So even in Asia, you have a significant secularism that's top down, right? And religion is looked at as backward. This is a mullah. Look at this mullah walking around, right? The madrasa, the student of ilm, is considered, a backward, thing, right? Azhar is the university you don't really want to go to, right? The rejects go to, right? They couldn't make it to Ain Shams, they couldn't make it to Halwan, they couldn't make it to AUC. Yeah, they couldn't make it to AUC, like I'm an AUC student, right? I get that, right? So if you're a hijabi or a niqabi in AUC, you're like, you got to be really confident, right? So those are, those dynamics work in those countries, right?
Do you know that they don't let in niqabis and AUCs?
Niqabis, yeah, I know, yeah. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying, right? So, to the point that I know AUCians who went in as hijabis and came out non-hijabi. It's
Sure.
just the culture of how, peer pressure. There's all these sort of things are happening. Being religious is any less intelligent, any less creative than anything else, right? But it's just a cultural phenomenon that happens in any country. But these things matter. So when you have a brand like that and you put it in certain countries' context, it's a bit odd. It's a bit unusual, right? It brings attention, but we've not had any problems. But it does bring attention, but it's bold. It can be bold, but people don't expect it, right? But we stuck with it. But at the same time, in some territories, it doesn't work at all because those territories are so mixed, right? That they have other people of other religions and there are tensions, right? So in some cases, like India, we've branded the new branch IDH London,
Okay.
rather than Islamic Design House.
Interesting.
So it works better. It just sits better in that territory, right? In that region. Everything else is the same. It's the same graphical treatment, the same clothing treatment, and everything. But it doesn't alienate anybody or doesn't make anyone feel anything. It's certainly not any less Islamic in its impression. But the brand name, is different. It's unique. It can be considered, you could say, very bold in its impression. Not everything that we do is Islamic, right? It's rather this design house is inspired by Islam. Does that make sense, right?
Yeah.
The notion of Islam, the Islamic heritage, whether it's Ibn Battuta's, legacy, or whether it's the Ottoman Empire, or whether it's the seerah that inspires it. There are good things that you can take from these legacies and you can incorporate into heritage, because we went through a revival where we wanted to bring all this amazing legacy to the forefront, because people were looking at religion or Islam as this backward religion and a terrorist religion, all that sort of stuff. But we were like, no, actually, we've got thousands of years of amazing heritage. This religion brought, so many great, inspired a lot of people to create amazing things from medicine to science, arts and creativity. Like, to the point that historians claim that Europe would have remained in the Dark Ages.
True.
Had it not been for Islam's influence upon its, Renaissance, So things like
ليخرجكم من
that.
الظلمات إلى النور.
Exactly, right?
Yeah. SubhanAllah,
Exactly, right?
Cool. I'm actually going. This is one of the issues we're facing. Like you said, not all cultures accept this very bold Islamic, like in your face branding, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to bring it because there are a few brands in Egypt that use Arabic and stuff like this, but not. There aren't Islamic brands. Even Nest, like you said, they maybe started off one day like this, but they're not like that anymore. So that's a struggle for me, and I find myself like carrying this weight of having to represent the deen. You know what I mean? And it's hard. It's really hard. And I sometimes find myself thinking, why did I do this? Why am I branding myself so hard like this? Why am I carrying this weight? Do I have to? I mean, is it even necessary? Do people care? You know what I mean?
But you know what it is? I think there should still be effort made to try and maintain what you're doing, and what many others are doing is keeping that Islam inspired element in your work, in your business, in what you do. Now, some people will just do it at the level of, like, I run my business in a halal way.
Yes.
That's enough. I don't need to say I'm doing it. I'm doing it secretly, and I donate to charity, and we donate every 10% of sales or whatever, right? And it's done in secret or openly, right? Or I do all my business halal way. That's the minimum. At least do your business halal way is the minimum that you should do, right? Right. So no lying, no cheating, doing it in the green way possible, not exploiting labor. All of these things put barakah in your business, right? That's the first fundamental. The second is, yeah, you can have a product and a business and a brand that identifies itself as Islamic or religious, but ultimately it does not need to go to the point that is preaching. Does that make sense? And that's
Totally.
what puts people off, right? And then there's the other thing is you could do it subtly, right? So you can have a graphical treatment, a design aesthetic that's inspired by Islam and the faith, but isn't openly saying it's religious, right? So you can have a brand like Nas. It will have positive messages. That's still Islamic, right? What it doesn't have is negative messaging, right? It doesn't have sexual messaging. It doesn't have anything that's haram in that respect, right? So it's got a positive message, but that's still Islamic, right? And it should be natural like that, because in some countries it's not normal to say I'm going to go to a halal restaurant. If I went to Egypt and I said, "Oh, take me to a halal restaurant," it would be like, "What do you mean, take you to a halal restaurant?" It's normal in the West because you just can't eat anywhere apart from a halal restaurant or a kosher restaurant or something, right? You have to be careful where you eat, right? But, so for people, religion was part and parcel of the fabric of culture. So when you try to make it separate, it's a bit weird. Like, what do you mean? You're trying to say this is more Islamic than something else, right? So you got to understand the subtleties of what you're saying, right?
Yes.
And so this is where being a lot more subtle can work well, because in an Egypt context, it's about positive, good affirmation of an impression of the faith, right? Doing positive things, showing positive attitude, right? But not preaching. Like, so I don't like to quote Amr Khalid because I'm not a big fan of him, but let's just take an example. So he would preach, but he would try and do positive acts. He'll encourage you to do positive acts. So what you learned was put into practice. Let's, I don't know, collect old clothing and donate it to charity. That act is Islamic. It doesn't have to be called Islamic, but it's Islamic. Do you understand? Right?
Yeah, completely.
So, in my opinion, that's the proper way of doing da'wah, because it's natural. It's not preachy. It's not like this is bid'ah, this is haram. Do you understand?
I know what you mean, but there's a difference between you defined some acts as Islamic right now, but there's a difference between that, like staying under the umbrella of Islam, and actually telling people that this is Islamic to promote the idea. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
course.
that's the burden that I'm carrying, or that I put onto myself.
Yeah, look, I think it comes again. It's all what you do. What you ultimately do will be dictated by context, right? So where you what you're saying, and if you apply the product that you're doing, and you put it in Canada, it'll work differently from the way it works in Egypt or Jordan or the UAE, right?
Yeah.
And you're gonna have to change your language and your message and everything. Now, if fundamentally your product has to say it's something Islamic, now if it's contextually not Islamic, like meaning that I have a product that's a prayer mat, people know it's a prayer mat.
Yeah.
I don't actually need to use any religious language.
Because the product is
inherently a religious item or item for use.
I love those prayer mats, by the way. I don't know where to get them from. Like, you don't ship worldwide, right?
Yeah, it's not entirely shipped worldwide. We're trying to get it in as many places as possible. I don't know if the IDH branches sell them, but in some places they work and some places they don't as well. People don't want to pay a lot more money for a prayer mat that they can get for free. Right? In a lot of countries you can get prayer mats for free, right? The people come from Hajj and they have like a suitcase full of them, right?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever bought one.
Yeah, exactly. So, in Egypt, people like, why would I want to buy a prayer mat? Right? Yeah. People give it to me as a gift if that is like, khamsa guinea, and it's not, it's not something to spend, 350 guinea on. Do you understand? Or however the currency rate is now.
How much is it? Now.
It's around say $45 or $40.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, so it's like 700 guinea, 700 pounds.
700 guinea, yani, if that's someone's more than monthly wages, right?
Yeah,
some people, right? So I'm, but what then at the lower end, right? But but what I'm saying is So what doesn't make sense? For the design is not significant enough for them to say, yeah, I want to spend that money, right? So a very small group of people will buy it. You know, the people who are easily spending money on fancy cars and live in a villa in Tagam Khamis or something, right? I don't know, Sitt or something. I don't know. All right.
You know Egypt
But,
too well, man.
yeah, I have a house in Egypt as well. So
Oh, really?
If
Okay.
that's
Do you come regularly?
not as regularly as I should.
Okay.
Not as regularly as I should. No. Basically, post events, I've been coming less. What I'm saying is, if you can, I believe subtlety is the way, right? But if your product doesn't identify itself as Islamic inherently, then you should have an element that does say it, right? So, if you're doing messaging, the messaging definitely, yeah, exactly, right? So if it can say it, then it should say it. If it's in the design or the cut or the modesty of it, then it's obvious, So that, for example, the jilbabs that we do, they're obviously modest clothing, right? And so therefore you don't need to say it's Islamic. So the language that we use is more identity language, right? We say the word faith. We say we will use the words independent. These are independent, professional, educated women who travel the world, right? So that's the impression that we're giving about these women, right? That's how they see themselves. That's how they want to see themselves, right?
Yeah.
And their clothing represents that. But the clothing doesn't say, I'm an independent, Muslimah, muhajjaba. It doesn't say that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't need to, right? So it's finding the design language in the clothing is also important, right? So Arabic typically brings you into that sphere to some degree, right? Using the right words, right? So what you're saying, MSLM, right? So you're saying Muslim, right? Maybe you want to change it up, use another word instead of Muslim. That says the same thing, right? I'm not saying use mu'min. I'm not saying, do you understand? But you could use other words that inherently reflect an Islamic concept, right?
I actually have another brand.
Okay.
It's called Alien Beard.
Alien Beard.
Yeah. So it's kind of like it's kind of like a bit crazier, a bit more niche, and it's based on all of what you're saying. It's like it's Stranger, for example. So Stranger is directly related to Islam, like Outcast, like stuff like this, and that's the brand I want to go global with, inshallah.
So you're tapping into a subculture understanding of what how people feel is identity. Again, it's about identity, but yes, while you have the alien beard concept, the sort of the ghuraba concept, what you still should do is have a positive spin on it, right? Like it's that, but it's cool, right? It's not like but we're different, but we're cool, we're different, we know we're different and we're proud of it, but using all of those things. Sorry, I don't know if my headphones are going to cut out any moment, but it's all about finding the right language in the graphics that you use, as well as the messaging that you put out in the marketing, right? And you always should show the people how they want to be seen themselves in that context. So sometimes you have to take them out of context. So you can take I was working with a travel company, right? And they do halal tourism for Muslims in America, right? So Muslims in America, they want to go abroad, but they want everything to be halal for them. The accommodation private, the food is to be stuff. Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
So this company does it. And I said, look, you got to literally take the Muslim couple and put them in Machu Picchu in South America, or you put them in Brazil on the Amazon, or you put them near Everest, places they don't think that they should go, right? Because that's what they aspire to, but they never could think that they could go there, right? They think, Alhambra in Spain, I'll go to Turkey on the mosque, but no, that's not the typical context. Don't put them there. Show them going to these other places, right? And watch how that affects them, their psyche, because then they think, this company can take me there and I don't have to worry about privacy, I don't have to worry about food, do you understand? And then you've changed the impression that they're supposed to get. So show your customers, show your brand buyers
that they
what
can be
they
normal.
yeah, they're normal. They're very normal, and that this is something that they can aspire to. Yeah.
Very cool. I don't want to tire you. I mean, I'm used to
Yeah.
going over 2 hours. So if you have something, I mean, I could let you go.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to go because I've got to do a school run.
Okay.
My battery on my headphones are gonna cut out because they just
Okay.
went goo, goo, goo on me. So we can probably, if there's more questions, we can just do another session.
Okay,
Maybe not
that'd be
today, but
awesome.
maybe we'll just do another time, and then you can just cut it to a shorter length because I think I rabble on a bit too much. at
Actually,
times.
I've enjoyed this very, very much. I hope you have too. And
Yeah.
go on for that school run.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate it. Right?
I appreciate it too.
Yeah. All right.
All right, bro.
Excellent.
السلام
Alright.
عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
زي ما قلت لكم انا صراحه كنت عايزها تستمر اكتر جدا جدا الصراحه. يعني حاسس ان عندي اسئله كتير تاني، بس على الاقل الحمد لله كونت العلاقه معاه اللي تقدر تخليني يبقى في يعني باب مفتوح اقدر ارجع له اتكلم معاه وبتاع. و يعني الحمد لله انا مبسوط جدا. يعني حاسس ان انا انجزت الصراحه. حاسس ان انا عملت حاجه بجد اقدر افتخر بيها. يمكن يجي تاني ان شاء الله. اعتقد كده. في حلقات تانية ان شاء الله نازله بالانجليزي. في مفاجاه كبيره جدا ان شاء الله جايه قريب. شخص برضو يعني بودكاست بالانجليزي تاني لشخص انا كان دايما عايز اجيبه في البودكاست. اظن كتير جدا منكم عارفه. كنت مشير لهم حاجه قريب على الفيسبوك بيج عندي وعلى اليوتيوب. مش هقول هو مين، هسيبها مفاجاه ان شاء الله. و لان هي يعني حاجه كبيره بالنسبه لي باذن الله. فقولوا لي رايكم في الكومنتس، قولوا لي رايكم في البودكاست بالانجليزي. يعني ادوني فيدباك كده، خلوا الدنيا بوزيتيف. وانتوا سبب رئيسي جدا في ان انا قادر يعني قادر اعمل الحاجة اللي انا عايز اعملها من غير ما افكر كتير والناس هتقول ايه. يعني انتوا بتدعموا جدا جدا اللي انا بعمله. وبتخلوني بدوس جدا يعني بجد. وانا قدرت دوت. يعني قدرت ده لما بصيت على الكونتنت اللي انا بعمله، وان هو دايما جديد، دايما محدش عارف ده يعني ايه. فلما بلاقي الجمهور معايا بستوعب انه يعني من غير الناس دي ايه هو البودكاست؟ ما إيه مين هيسمع 2.5 ساعة اصلا لاي شيء في الدنيا؟ فلما بنزل حاجة ساعة دلوقتي انتوا بتقولوا لي ايه انت ايه ايه قليل ليه كده يعني. فعاش جدا ليكوا الصراحة. النجاح بتاعنا فعلا الحمد لله. يعني مبسوط جدا الحمد لله. نايس. عاش. عايز افكركم تاني ان البودكاست فيديو واوديو. فلو انت عندك ايفون خش على ابل بودكاست ويدور على هازكاست. ولو عملت ريفيو لهازكاست، يعني لو دخلت كتبت كومنت وعملت ريتنج وبتاع، ده بيفرق جدا. لانه انا اكتشفت ان البودكاست بتاعي في مرحلة من المراحل كان البودكاست رقم 26 على العالم بشكل ما. انا معرفش ده ازاي الصراحة يعني. وهو كان الاول على مصر لفترة طويلة. ويعني فالحوارات الريتنجز دي بتفرق جدا يعني. فادخلوا نزلوا الابس ديت، البودكاست بينزل عشان تسمعوه. لان انا بشوف ناس بتقول انا نزلت الحلقة من اليوتيوب وحولتها اوديو عشان اسمعها. طب يا جدعان ليه؟ ما هو اصلا نازل كده. اوكي. ساوند كلاود برضو طبعا يعني. بس هسيبكم عشان الحلقة طولت جدا. واشوفكم ان شاء الله في الحلقة الجاية. السلام عليكم.